"My son demanded I sign over the house. You'll be dead soon anyway." He laughed. The next day, my lawyer read the will his grandfather left. He didn't know his grandfather's will had one provision. The house was his only if he never demanded it. Next morning, my lawyer opened the folder and announced something that shocked him. "I've been holding this story for 3 months now, sitting on it, turning it over in my hands like a piece of broken glass, trying to figure out how to say it without sounding like a bitter old man who got what he deserved. But I didn't get what I deserved. And neither did my father's house. So here it is. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 61 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, just outside it, in a neighborhood called Bellevue, where the hills roll lazy and the oak trees are older than most of the marriages on the street. I spent 34 years as a licensed electrician. I know how to fix things. I know how current moves through a system, how one bad connection can bring the whole thing down. Funny how that applies to families too. The house I'm talking about sits on Sycamore Ridge Road. 4 bedrooms, a covered front porch, with a swing my father hung in 1974. Hardwood floors that creak in the exact same spot near the hallway closet that they did when I was 9 years old. My father, Earl Pruitt, built that house with money he saved working double shifts at a furniture plant for 11 years straight. He didn't hire a contractor. He laid the foundation himself, poured the concrete himself, framed every wall himself. The man had hands like catcher's mitts, and a laugh you could hear from 2 driveways over. Earl died in 2019, left the house to me. I cried at the funeral, and then I went home and sat on his porch swing and cried some more. That house was him. Every nail in it was him. My wife Donna and I moved in 6 months after the funeral. We repainted the kitchen. We kept everything else exactly the same. It felt right, like honoring something sacred. Donna passed in the spring of 2022. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to gone. I held her hand at Vanderbilt Medical and watched her leave, and I drove home alone to Sycamore Ridge, and I sat in that creek spot near the hallway closet, and I didn't move for a long time. So when I tell you that house is all I had left, I need you to understand what I mean by that. My son Brett was 34 when all of this started. Sharp dresser, good-looking kid, got Donna's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a combination that sounds charming until you're on the wrong end of it. He works in real estate, commercial properties mostly, and he married a woman named Colleen, who has the warmest smile you've ever seen and the coldest instincts I've ever encountered. It took me years to separate those two things. That was my mistake. After Donna passed, Brett started calling more, which felt like love. He and Colleen started coming by on Sundays, which felt like family. They'd sit at the kitchen table and we'd eat, and Colleen would compliment the house, and Brett would say things like, "This place has real value, Dad. You know that, right?" I thought he was just being proud. I was not a smart man. The calls shifted somewhere around the fall of 2022. Subtle at first, the way Brett would steer conversations toward my health, my plans, my situation. He started using that word, situation, to describe my life like it was a property assessment. "We just want to make sure you're set up right, given your situation." My situation was that I was 61, recently widowed, and learning how to make a full pot of coffee for one person, which, if you've never done it, is its own quiet kind of heartbreak. Then in January, I went to see Dr. Raymond Foss for my annual checkup. Ray has been my doctor for 12 years. He's the kind of man who tells you bad news like he's handing you a life jacket, not a death sentence. He found something. Prostate cancer. Early stage. He sat across from me in that exam room, and he said, "Walter, we caught this early. Your numbers, your age, your overall health. You have excellent options and a strong prognosis. This is not a death sentence." He even put his hand on my shoulder. Ray's not a shoulder guy, so I understood the gravity. I drove home in silence. The January air in Nashville was sharp and gray. That particular cold that gets into your bones without permission. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. I made the mistake of telling Brett that same night. I want you to remember that detail. I called my son because I was scared, and I wanted to hear his voice, and I thought, I genuinely believed that is what a father does. You call your kid when you're scared. Brett was quiet for a moment on the phone. Then he said, Dad, okay. This is actually something we need to talk about soon. Not, are you okay? Not, what do you need? We need to talk about something. Like I'd just told him the roof was leaking. I told myself I was reading too much into it. 3 weeks later, Brett showed up on a Tuesday. No Colleen. Just Brett, in his gray wool coat, carrying a manila folder like he was about to close a deal. He sat down at Donna's kitchen table, the same table where she used to grade her students' papers on Sunday evenings, and he laid that folder in front of me. Inside was a deed transfer document, fully prepared. My name at the top, his at the bottom. The property at 412 Sycamore Ridge Road, Bellevue, Tennessee. It just makes sense, Dad, he said. You might need care soon. Medical bills. You can't manage this place alone. Colleen and I can handle it. We'll make sure you're taken care of. I stared at that paper for a long time. Something in my chest was doing something I didn't have a name for. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something older and uglier than both. Brett, I said slowly, this is your grandfather's house. It's your house, he said. And you need to be practical. I told him I needed time to think. That's when his face changed. It was fast. If you blinked, you'd have missed it. The reasonable son disappeared, and something else sat across from me in that gray wool coat. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped just slightly. Not loud enough to be a threat, just quiet enough to be one. Dad, he tapped the folder. Sign it over. You'll be dead soon anyway. Then he laughed. Not a big laugh, not a villain laugh. Just a short, dismissive sound. Like I was a tenant who'd overstayed a lease, and we were all just waiting for the unit to clear out. I want to be very honest with you about what happened inside me in that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't explode. I didn't stand up. I didn't say anything sharp or strong or righteous. I picked up the pen and I signed the document. Because in that moment, sitting at Donna's table, in Earl's house, with cancer in my body, and my son looking at me like I was already an inconvenience to be managed, I believed him. Not consciously, but somewhere deep in the wiring of me, I believed I was already fading. That the right thing was to comply, to shrink, to hand it over and stop being a burden. That is what betrayal does at its worst. It doesn't just take from you, it makes you hand it over yourself. Brett took the folder. He stood up, buttoned his coat, and said, I'll have Gordon look it over. He meant Gordon Hale, the family attorney who had worked with my father for decades. I thought nothing of it in that moment. He left. I heard his car pull out of the driveway. I sat at that table until it was dark outside. I didn't eat. I didn't turn on a light. I just sat there in Earl's house while the January dark came in through the windows, and I thought about my father's hands and my wife's laugh and the way 34 years of hard work had somehow ended up in a manila folder on a Tuesday afternoon. At some point, I fell asleep in the chair. My phone rang at 7:48 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at it confused, the way you do when you've slept somewhere wrong and your neck hates you for it. The screen said, Gordon Hale. I almost didn't answer. Gordon was in his 70s, sharp as a tack, and had a voice like gravel rolling down a tin roof. He'd known my father since the 1980s. He'd been at Earl's funeral. Walter. His voice was different, tight, deliberate. I need you to come to my office this morning. Right now, if you can. Gordon, what? Don't bring anyone. Don't tell Brett. Don't mention this call. A pause. And Walter, do not panic. But you need to hear something your father left behind. I stood up from that chair with my neck aching, and my heart doing something complicated, and I grabbed my keys. I had no idea that my father, 11 years in the ground, had just reached forward through time with one hand and caught me. I had no idea that the document sitting on Gordon's desk was the reason Brett's very first word to me had already cost him everything. I drove toward downtown Nashville in the February cold, the bare trees lining the highway like they were waiting for something, and the thought that kept circling my mind, over and over, wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was simpler than that. It was, my father knew. He knew something about the nature of people and the nature of want, and he had done something about it decades before the problem ever arrived. And I was about to find out what. Gordon Hale's office sat on the third floor of an old brick building in East Nashville, the kind of place that smelled like leather and paper and decisions that couldn't be undone. I'd been there twice before, once when my father signed his original will, and once after he died. Both times, I left feeling like something important had happened that I didn't fully understand. This time would be different. I parked on the street. The February morning was cold enough that my breath came out in little clouds as I walked. My neck still hurt from sleeping in that kitchen chair. My mind was still turning over Gordon's words. Don't tell Brett. Don't mention this call. What did my father do? The receptionist, a woman named Darlene who had worked for Gordon since before I was married, looked at me with something I couldn't read. Sympathy maybe, or anticipation. She just nodded toward the back office and said, "He's waiting for you, Walter." Gordon stood when I came in. He was 74 years old, thin as a rail, with white hair that he still combed the same way he probably combed it in 1965. His handshake was firm, his eyes were serious. "Sit down," he said, not unkind, just direct. I sat. There was a manila folder on his desk, old, the edges slightly yellowed. I stared at it like it might bite me. "Walter, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." Gordon settled into his chair and folded his hands on the desk. "Your father came to me in 1999. You were, what, 37 then? Brett was just a boy, maybe 10, 11 years old." I nodded slowly. 1999. That was the year my mother had her first stroke. Earl was consumed with taking care of her. I barely saw him that whole winter. Earl asked me to add a provision to his will, a specific clause regarding the property on Sycamore Ridge. Gordon paused. He was very precise about the language. He made me read it back to him 3 times. Then he made me lock it in a separate file that wouldn't be referenced unless certain conditions were triggered. Conditions. My mouth was dry. What kind of conditions? Gordon opened the folder. He slid a document across the desk, a single page, typed, with my father's signature at the bottom. The date read, November 14th, 1999. "This is what your father called the forfeiture clause," Gordon said. "The property at 412 Sycamore Ridge Road was designated to pass to your heir, meaning Brett, under one absolute condition." He looked at me over his reading glasses. "The heir must never demand the property, not through coercion, not through manipulation, not through legal pressure, not through emotional exploitation. If that condition is broken, ever, ownership reverts automatically to a secondary trust your father established." I couldn't speak. I just stared at that paper with my father's handwriting at the bottom. "The trust has been sitting dormant for 22 years, Gordon continued. "It's administered by my office. The funds inside have actually grown modestly. Your father put a small amount in there, Enough to cover legal fees if this ever became necessary. He paused. Walter, he knew. Knew what? My voice sounded strange to me, distant. He knew that money and property reveal character. He told me, and I remember this clearly because it struck me at the time. He said, "Gordon, I love my grandson, but I've seen what inheritance does to people. If that boy ever becomes the kind of man who demands what should be given freely, then he doesn't deserve to receive it at all." I sat back in my chair. The room felt smaller suddenly. The air felt thicker. "Dad, you saw it before I did." "The deed transfer Brett had you sign yesterday," Gordon said carefully. "I received a copy this morning. He sent it to my office for processing, probably assuming I'd just file it and move on." A thin smile crossed Gordon's face. "He doesn't know me very well." "What does this mean?" I asked. "Legally, what happens now?" Gordon leaned forward. "It means the transfer is void. It has been void since the second Brett opened his mouth and said what he said. The forfeiture clause is ironclad. I made sure of that in 1999, and I've reviewed it twice since then. The moment Brett demanded that property, under those circumstances, he triggered the provision. The house doesn't belong to him. It can never belong to him. Not through you, not through inheritance, not through any legal mechanism." I felt something shifting inside my chest. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated than that. He laughed at me. He told me I'd be dead soon, and he had already lost everything. "There's more," Gordon said. Of course there was more. I pulled the deed transfer document this morning to examine it before filing. Gordon's expression darkened. "Walter, the notary stamp on that document belongs to Colleen Pruitt, your daughter-in-law." I nodded slowly. Colleen was a licensed notary, had been for years. She sometimes notarized documents for Brett's real estate deals. "The problem," Gordon continued, "is that Colleen wasn't present when you signed. I know this because you signed it at your kitchen table yesterday afternoon. Colleen was not there, which means she notarized a document she did not witness." He let that hang in the air. "That's fraud, Walter. Criminal fraud. A Class E felony in the state of Tennessee." Colleen knew. She was part of this from the beginning. Something cold settled into my stomach. All those Sunday dinners, all those warm smiles, all those compliments about the house. She was measuring the rooms before Donna was even called. "What do I do?" I asked. The question came out quieter than I intended. Gordon studied me for a long moment. "That depends on what kind of man you want to be, Walter. You have options. Several of them. Some are legal, some are personal, some are both." I looked at the document with my father's signature. 22 years ago, he had sat in this same office and thought about the future. About me, about Brett, about what people become when they think no one is watching. And he had built a trap. Not out of cruelty, out of love. He wanted to protect me, even from my own son. "I don't want revenge," I said slowly. The word felt strange in my mouth, incomplete. Gordon raised an eyebrow. "No?" "I want consequences." I looked up at him. "There's a difference." For the first time since I'd walked in, Gordon smiled. A real smile, not a professional one. "Your father," he said, "would have said the exact same thing." I drove home in silence. The Nashville traffic moved around me like I was invisible, which suited me fine. My mind was running calculations I didn't know I was capable of. Brett didn't know about the forfeiture clause. He thought the deed transfer was legitimate. He probably thought he'd won. Let him think that. The idea came to me somewhere on I-40, passing the exit for Bellevue, watching the February sun try to break through the gray. Let him think he won. Let him plan. Let him measure rooms and talk to real estate agents and count money that will never be his, and then take it all away. I pulled into my driveway, my house, my father's legacy. and I sat there for a long time. I had a choice to make. I could confront Brett immediately, call him up, tell him about the forfeiture clause, watch his face fall, and be done with it. That would be satisfying in the short term, but it would be over too quickly. He would rage and threaten and eventually slink away, and I would never know the full extent of what he and Colleen had planned. Or I could wait, watch, gather. I chose the second option. The next 6 weeks were an education. I called Dr. Foss and got serious about my treatment plan. Early-stage prostate cancer responds well to intervention when you catch it in time. Ray put me on a hormone therapy protocol and scheduled regular monitoring. "You're going to be fine, Walter," he told me during one appointment. "Statistically, you've got 15, 20 good years ahead of you, maybe more." I didn't tell Brett any of this. Instead, I started walking. Every morning, 6:30, I walked the neighborhood. The February cold gave way to a warmer March. The trees started budding. I felt my body getting stronger, my mind getting clearer. And I let Brett believe I was dying. He called every few days now, checking in. His voice had that particular sweetness that I now recognized as calculation. "How are you feeling, Dad? You taking your medications? You need anything?" "I need my son back, but that ship has sailed. I'm managing," I would say. I made my voice tired, weak. Let him hear what he wanted to hear. Colleen started coming by alone sometimes. She would bring groceries I didn't ask for and walk through the house slowly, her eyes cataloging everything. I caught her once, taking pictures of the backyard on her phone, staging photos. She's already thinking about the listing. I said nothing. I smiled. I thanked her for the groceries. Meanwhile, I was building my case. I called my late wife's sister, Pauline, who lived outside Memphis. Pauline had never liked Brett. She'd told Donna that directly more than once, and she was a retired paralegal who understood documents and evidence and the importance of paper trails. "Walter," she said when I explained everything, "I always knew that boy was rotten. Donna saw it too, near the end. She just didn't want to break your heart." That hurt more than I expected. I also reached out to a man named Dennis Cutler. Dennis was 81 years old, still sharp, and had been Earl's neighbor and closest friend for 30 years. He was present the day Earl signed the 1999 will. He remembered the conversation clearly. "Your daddy was worried," Dennis told me over coffee at his kitchen table. "He loved that grandson of yours. But he said, 'I remember this exactly,' he said. 'Dennis, some people love you for you, and some people love you for what you've got. I need to make sure my son is protected from the second kind.' He saw it, Dad. Even when Brett was 10 years old, he saw the potential for this. I documented everything. I kept notes, I saved text messages, I recorded dates and times and conversations, and I discovered something else, something that made the whole thing worse. It happened in late March. Brett came by one afternoon when I was supposedly napping. I wasn't napping, I was sitting in the dark living room, watching through the curtain, waiting. He let himself in with the key I'd given him years ago. He didn't call out, didn't announce himself. He just walked in like he owned the place, because he thinks he does. I stayed silent, watched through the crack in the hallway door. Brett walked through the house slowly. He ran his hand along the walls. He opened closets. He took photos. And then he made a phone call. "Phil, it's Brett. Yeah, I'm at the property now." A pause. "I know we can't list it yet, but I want to be ready. The old man's got maybe 2 years, tops. Cancer's aggressive at that age." Another pause. "The structure's solid, built in the 70s but well maintained. We're thinking full renovation once he's gone. Open concept, new kitchen. Property values in Bellevue are climbing. I'm thinking we could flip it for 450, maybe 500. Maybe 2 years. Once he's gone. Flip it." I stood in that dark hallway and felt something inside me turn to stone. This wasn't just greed. This wasn't just impatience. My son was standing in my father's house, in my house, on the phone with a real estate agent, actively planning for my death. He was waiting for me to die. He was counting on it. And I realized in that moment that whatever love I had left for Brett, whatever hope I'd been holding on to, that this was all a misunderstanding, that he would come to his senses, that the boy I raised was still in there somewhere. It was gone. My son had already buried me. Now it was time for him to learn what happens when the dead start fighting back. I stepped out of the hallway. Brett spun around, phone still in his hand. His face went pale. "Dad, I thought you were sleeping." I looked at him for a long moment. My son, Donna's eyes, my stubbornness, my father's house. And I smiled. "Just resting," I said quietly, getting my strength back. I gestured toward the kitchen. "You want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." He stared at me. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, wondering what I'd heard, wondering what I knew. "Sure," he said finally. "Coffee sounds great." We sat at Donna's kitchen table and drank coffee and talked about nothing. The weather, the Titans, his work. He never mentioned the phone call. I never mentioned what I'd heard. But something had changed between us. He knew it. I knew it. The game was different now. And in 5 weeks, when Gordon Hale walked into a room full of people who thought they were about to take everything from me, Brett would learn just how different. I finished my coffee. I looked at my son. And I thought, your grandfather built this house. Your grandmother lived in this house. Your mother died in this house. And you will never, ever own this house. That's not revenge. That's justice. The invitation was Brett's idea. Of course it was. He called on a Thursday in early April, his voice carrying that particular warmth I now understood was performance. "Dad, Colleen and I were thinking, we should have a family get-together, talk about plans, get everyone on the same page. Everyone on the same page. Like we're a board meeting, like I'm an agenda item." "That sounds nice," I said. I kept my voice tired, cooperative, the voice of a man who had stopped fighting. "Great. How about this Saturday? We'll come to you, bring some food, make a day of it." "Who's coming?" "Well, Colleen and me, her parents. They've been wanting to check in on you. And I thought we'd invite Terry, Brett's cousin, on Donna's side. A good woman, honest. Oh, and Phil might stop by. You remember Phil? He's a friend of mine in real estate. Just to give some friendly advice about the property. Options and things." Phil. The same Phil he was on the phone with. The flip it for $450 Phil. "That's thoughtful," I said. "I appreciate you looking out for me." Brett laughed. Not the cruel laugh from the kitchen table. A different one. Relaxed. The laugh of a man who thinks he's already won. "That's what family's for, Dad." I hung up and immediately called Gordon Hale. "Saturday," I told him. "They're coming Saturday. Brett's bringing witnesses. He wants to make it official." Gordon was quiet for a moment. "You want me there?" "I want you parked outside. I'll text you when it's time. Walter." Gordon's voice was careful. "Are you sure about this? We could handle it quietly. Send him a letter. File the paperwork. He'd never even see your face when he finds out." I thought about that. The easy way. The clean way. Then I thought about Donna's kitchen table. The sound of Brett's laugh. The words, "You'll be dead soon anyway." "I want to see his face," I said. "I need to." Understood. I could hear Gordon's grim smile through the phone. "I'll be there." Saturday arrived cool and bright. The kind of April morning where Nashville shakes off the last of winter and starts pretending it's spring. The dogwood trees along Sycamore Ridge were blooming white and pink. Birds were making noise like they had something to celebrate. Maybe they know something I don't. I woke up early, showered, put on a clean button-down shirt, made coffee. Then I sat at Donna's kitchen table and went through the folder one more time. The 1999 forfeiture clause, Gordon's legal opinion, the notary fraud documentation that Pauline had helped me organize, a printed timeline of Brett's visits and phone calls over the past 4 months, Dennis Cutler's signed witness statement about the day Earl added the provision to his will. Everything in order, everything documented, everything ready. Earl, I hope you're watching this. They arrived at 11. Brett came in first. Gray slacks, blue sweater, looking like a catalog model for comfortable betrayal. Colleen followed in a yellow dress, carrying a casserole dish like she was June Cleaver incarnate. Behind them came Colleen's parents, her father Lou, a retired insurance adjuster with a weak handshake, and her mother Deb, a woman who smiled too much and said too little. Terry arrived last. She hugged me at the door, a real hug, tight and warm, and whispered, "How are you holding up, Uncle Walter?" "Better than you know, sweetheart." "I'm okay," I said. "I'm really okay." Then Phil walked in, the real estate agent, at 40-something, thinning hair, carrying a leather folder like he was here on business, because he was. We gathered in the living room. Colleen served coffee. Small talk bounced around. The weather, the traffic on I-40, something about the Predators making the playoffs. I sat in Earl's old armchair and watched everyone arrange themselves like actors finding their marks. This is Brett's show. Let him run it. After 20 minutes of nothing, Brett cleared his throat. The room got quiet. He stood up, moved to the center of the room, and pulled out a folder. Different from the one he'd brought in January, but the same energy, the same cold calculation, dressed up as concern. "So, Dad," he began, "we all know why we're here." "No, Brett, you have no idea why we're here. Your health situation has been on everyone's mind. And this house, it's a lot to manage alone. The maintenance, the property taxes, the utilities." He shook his head, performing sadness. "It's just not practical for you anymore." Colleen nodded. Lou and Deb nodded. Phil opened his leather folder and started pulling out papers. "I've asked Phil to put together some preliminary assessments," Brett continued, "just to give us a sense of options when the time comes. When the time comes, when I'm dead, when I'm out of the way." Phil started talking. Square footage, renovation potential, comparable sales in the neighborhood. He used phrases like maximize value and strategic timing and estate liquidation. He never once looked at me. He was talking around me, through me, like I was already a ghost. I let it go on for almost 10 minutes. Terry was watching me. I could feel her eyes. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what. Finally, Brett turned to me. "So, Dad, what do you think? We just want to make sure you're taken care of. Make sure the property is handled right. For everyone's benefit. For everyone's benefit." I stood up slowly. My knees complained. My back complained. But I stood. "I think," I said, "that Gordon should come in now." Brett's face flickered. "What?" "Gordon Hale. He's parked outside. I texted him a few minutes ago." I walked to the front door and opened it. Gordon was already coming up the walkway, his own folder tucked under his arm. "Walter." Gordon nodded at me, then stepped inside. His eyes swept the room. Brett, Colleen, Lou, Deb, Phil, Terry. He took in the whole scene like a man reading a crime report. "What is this?" Brett's voice had an edge now. "Dad, what's going on?" "Sit down, Brett." I gestured to the chair he'd vacated. "You're going to want to be sitting for this." He didn't sit, but he stopped talking. Gordon moved to the center of the room. He opened his folder and pulled out the first document, the 1999 provision, yellowed at the edges, my father's signature at the bottom. "This," Gordon said, "is a provision added to Earl Pruitt's last will and testament on November 14th, 1999. Earl was very specific about the language. I have witnesses to this document, including a signed statement from Dennis Cutler, who was present at the signing. Brett's eyes darted between Gordon and me. I don't understand. The provision states that the property at 412 Sycamore Ridge Road would pass to Walter's heir, meaning you, Brett, under one absolute condition. Gordon's voice was steady, calm. The voice of a man who had delivered bad news 1,000 times. The heir must never demand the property through coercion, manipulation, legal pressure, or emotional exploitation. The room was silent. Phil had stopped shuffling his papers. Colleen's smile had frozen on her face. If that condition is ever broken, Gordon continued, ownership reverts automatically to a secondary trust established by Earl Pruitt. The trust has been dormant for 22 years. It is no longer dormant. Brett's face had gone pale. That's ridiculous. You can't enforce something like that. I wrote it. I filed it. I assure you, it's enforceable. Gordon pulled out the second document. This is my legal opinion, prepared over the past month, confirming that the forfeiture clause is valid, binding, and triggered. Triggered? Brett's voice cracked. What do you mean triggered? Gordon looked at me. I stepped forward. You sat at that table. I pointed toward the kitchen. You told me to sign over the house. And when I hesitated, you said, and I'm quoting directly, "Sign it over, Dad. You'll be dead soon anyway." Then you laughed. The room was absolutely still. That demand triggered the forfeiture clause. The deed transfer you had me sign is void. It has been void since the moment those words left your mouth. Brett stared at me. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. There's more, Gordon said. He pulled out the third document. The notary stamp on the void deed belongs to Colleen Pruitt, but Colleen was not present when Walter signed the document, which means she notarized something she did not witness. Gordon looked at Colleen, whose face had gone the color of old milk. That's fraud. A Class E felony in Tennessee. I've already forwarded the documentation to the Secretary of State's office. Colleen's hands started shaking. She looked at Brett. You told me. You said it was fine. You said he'd already agreed. Shut up, Brett hissed. You handed me the wrong document. Colleen's voice was rising, panic breaking through the careful composure. There were 2 copies. You gave me the wrong one to stamp. This is your fault. I said, shut up. Terry stood up slowly. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Brett, what is wrong with you? That's your father. Your father. Brett spun toward her. Stay out of this, Terry. This doesn't concern you. He's my uncle. Terry's voice was cold now. He's family. Real family. Not whatever you are. The room was collapsing. Lou and Deb were looking at each other, confused, embarrassed. Phil was quietly packing his folder, probably calculating how fast he could get to his car. Colleen had started crying, whether from fear or anger, I couldn't tell. And Brett turned to me. His face was different now, stripped of performance. I could see the real Brett underneath. The one who had been waiting for me to die. The one who had already mentally spent the money from selling his grandfather's house. Dad, his voice was low, almost threatening. This isn't over. I'll contest this. I'll sue. I'll take it to court. Gordon stepped forward. Please do. The forfeiture clause includes a legal defense provision funded by your grandfather's trust. I have a team of attorneys ready. Your grandfather specifically anticipated this. You can't do this. Brett was shaking now. You can't just. I'm your son. I'm your only son. I looked at him for a long moment. My son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike on this very street. The teenager I'd helped with homework at that kitchen table. The young man I'd been so proud of when he graduated college. Where did that boy go? When did he become this? You're right, I said quietly. You are my son. And that's why this hurts as much as it does. I reached into my pocket and pulled out one more document. My own will, updated 3 weeks ago. I've changed my estate plan, I said. Everything I own, This house, my savings, my life insurance, goes to the Earl Pruitt Memorial Trade Scholarship Fund. It's administered through the Technical College downtown. First scholarship gets awarded this fall. I paused. To young people who want to learn a trade, like your grandfather did, like I did. Brett's face contorted. You're giving it to strangers? You're giving my inheritance to strangers? It's not your inheritance anymore. You forfeited it. I stepped closer to him. And here's what you need to understand, Brett. I didn't do this because I hate you. I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. Because you had a father who loved you, a grandfather who built something for you, and you threw it all away because you couldn't wait. Brett was breathing hard. His hands were clenched. For a moment, I thought he might swing at me. Then something broke behind his eyes. Not remorse, not understanding, just defeat. He grabbed Colleen's arm. We're leaving. They pushed past Gordon, past Terry, past Lou and Deb, who were already gathering their things. Phil had vanished at some point. Smart man. At the door, Brett turned back one more time. I didn't mean it, he said. His voice was different now. Smaller. What I said that day, I didn't mean it. I looked at my son, really looked at him. Yes, you did, I said. That's the part I have to live with. He left. The door closed behind him. The house was quiet. Terry came over and put her hand on my shoulder. Gordon started packing up his folder. Through the window, I could see Brett and Colleen arguing in the driveway, their marriage already fracturing under the weight of what they'd done together. I sat down in Earl's armchair. It's done, Dad. It's done. The scholarship fund awarded its first grant that October. A 19-year-old kid named Marcus, from the east side of Nashville, who wanted to be an electrician. He came to the ceremony with his mother, who cried the whole time. I shook his hand and told him about my father, about the house on Sycamore Ridge, about what it means to build something with your hands that outlasts you. Brett and Colleen separated that summer. The notary fraud investigation resulted in Colleen losing her license. Brett never called, not once. My cancer treatment continued. Dr. Foss says my numbers look good. I might have 20 years left, maybe more. I still live in the house on Sycamore Ridge. I still sit on the porch swing Earl hung in 1974. I still walk every morning, watching the neighborhood change, watching the seasons turn. Some nights, I think about forgiveness, whether I should reach out, whether there's still a chance to salvage something. But then, I remember his laugh, the casual cruelty of it. The way he said you'll be dead soon anyway, like I was already gone. And I understand what my father understood 30 years ago. Some people love you for you. Some people love you for what you've got. The trick is figuring out which is which before it's too late. Earl figured it out. He built a trap out of love, and it caught exactly what it was meant to catch. And me? I learned something too. Revenge isn't about destruction. It isn't about hate. Real revenge, the kind that matters, is about consequences. It's about making sure the people who would take everything from you have to live with the weight of what they did. Brett has to wake up every day knowing he lost his grandfather's house because of his own words. He has to live with Terry's disgust, with Colleen's resentment, with the knowledge that his father saw exactly who he was and chose accordingly. That's not cruelty. That's justice. And justice, unlike revenge, doesn't burn out. It just sits there, quiet and permanent, reminding you of exactly who you chose to become. I finish my coffee every morning at Donna's kitchen table. The sun comes through the window the same way it always has. The floor creaks in that spot near the hallway closet. Earl built this house. I kept this house. And someday, when I'm actually gone, it'll become something else. A scholarship, an opportunity, a chance for someone who actually deserves it. That's my legacy now. Not what I gave my son, what I gave instead.